Hey, I'm Guy.
I'm John.
It's our YouTube channel. Subscribe to it and give this video a like.
Podcast below in the description. Subscribe to that as well.
Also, check out our friends at deck.com/ham, John.
Deck.com/ham. If you have a truck, if you're a working man, get on this right now. Deck.com/ham.
Makes organizing, accessing, protecting, securing, and everything you need so much easier.
Do it.
He said this during, I pulled these quotes from 49ers Web Zone, who compiled some of what Florio said, John.
God, I love aggregators.
I keep going back to the common denominator for dysfunction in Green Bay, the dysfunction in San Francisco, the dysfunction with the Rams where they dumped Jared Goff for Matthew Stafford, the dysfunction with the Seahawks. It all traces back to Tom Brady. The dysfunction, is he just listing NFC champions as dysfunctional? What is he talking about? He went on to say, or one of the other things he said that he listed as evidence that the Niners are dysfunctional was that they traded up to 3 before they knew who they wanted, and in his estimation, they could have got their guy at 12.
Well, I think a lot of the media feels like they have egg on their face with the Mac Jones thing. They put all their chips in the middle of the table for whoever was telling them that, and they were adamant. And it wasn't just they felt like people taking swings. People kept doubling, tripling, and quadrupling down. And then Mac Jones was not only not selected, he went 15th. So it's like a lot of people look dumb. Now, I don't think that's necessarily what he means here. I do believe when Kyle said that they were taking Trey Lance the entire time, I said from the beginning that I don't know if this is true, but when they made the trade, I believe that they had their list. They were going to – now, obviously, things can change over a month and a half or whatever. They made the trade, I do believe, to take Trey Lance. And I think it's been proven that when they did that, it had a domino effect on the Broncos, who then traded for Teddy Bridgewater, and the Carolina Panthers. Like, over that month, they got word, like, it's going to be Trey Lance. And they got Sam Darnold and Teddy Bridgewater. Because Trey Lance, I saw one of the things he was saying, again, I didn't read this, an aggregator had wrote this. One thing, Florio was adamant that the Niners screwed up the trade. They could have got Trey Lance at 12. That is not correct. They could have got Mac Jones at 12. That has been proven. Trey Lance, no chance to me he makes it past like 5 because those teams would have traded up to get him. Trey Lance, who was on the Colts board, like he was widely, highly thought about. Mac Jones was not. Mac Jones was the ultimate smokescreen because nobody in the freaking league. I talked to a team that was not in the quarterback mix, and I said, where do you think if the Niners don't take Mac Jones, not that I believe they would, this was in like April leading up to draft, where do you think he's going to go? He's like, you know what's funny? We were sitting with our feet up, bullshitting after meetings. We had the same fucking conversation because we couldn't find a place. Bill might have been the only guy. Bill ended up taking him. So I think a lot of these people feel they got played to the Rams on Florio. Like trading for Matt Stafford and getting rid of Jared Goff isn't dysfunction. It's a genius freaking move. Every Niner fan I know wanted Matt Stafford, and rightfully so. What are you talking about? Dysfunction. Now, you could argue, like, is it classy the way Sean McVay's talking shit about McVay? Is that the right thing to do? That's not dysfunction. Honestly, I appreciate the authenticity. If you hate a motherfucker, tell me. Right? What Aaron Rodgers and Russell Wilson do, I think, is kind of fraudulent. Come out and say it, guys. Russell, what player do you want? Like, do you just hate your teammates? Just say it. But you never will because you're this corporate –
No. Hold on. You can't say I hate my teammates if you're going to play for that.
Not hate my teammates.
So that's not. That's the right.
But ultimately, he's mad. Like, you want better play. Like, what player do you want? Like, who is the guy you want? Like, Aaron, what is it that you claim it's not Jordan Love? What is it? What's going on? But they will never say it ever. Where it's like I give Sean McVay some credit. He's at least telling you can't stand the guy. Like I appreciate authenticity, which is something that is clearly lost.
We all appreciate it, but it's not always in your best interest. Just like it wasn't in Kyle's best interest to be authentic leading up to the draft, right? Like, I think part of what happened with Kyle when he said what he told Tim, he wanted everybody to think it was Mac Jones at that press conference. I think the way his press conference was interpreted was properly interpreted based on what he wanted people to think. Now, the question just became after that point in time, is he lying or is he telling the truth? But it's clear he wanted people to think, at least he has said this, and I think we talked about this after the fact. The thing to interpret from that press conference is he's talking about Mac Jones. The question then is he telling you the truth or is he lying? But that's a separate issue. The idea that is proof of dysfunction, or because here's the other thing Florio is leaving out of this. If we accept his premise that by trading up that they traded up to 3 without knowing who they were going to take, let's just accept the premise for a second. Kyle has, I think, had a pretty good answer for that, which is it allowed us to do our due diligence for a month and a half without having to hide anything, which is a little untrue because then he went on to hide things. So, some of these things knock into other things. But the point is, part of trading up to 3 is so you can do a deep dive on guys, right? You can show up to Trey Lance's pro day. You can have Trey Lance work out with John Beck. You're not quite as worried about. I do think there are some holes in like this whole thing being presented like this was the master plan and it played out exactly how we wanted from the Niners standpoint. But I do think if you knock them for trading up early, you ignore the fact that they probably did get to do some work on players that would have been harder to do if they weren't sitting there at 3.
To me, if you're operating under the premise they did not know, I don't know if dysfunctional would be the right word. I would say that's pretty insane. If you made the trade not having a guy circled, and then like any human, if you have a month or 2 months to close a deal, right, you should do more due diligence. Like, okay, but if you just made the move, like we think we like one of these 3 guys, let's let it rip. Like that, I think we would both be on the same page. If that came out, like they literally had no clue, they were just going to see, that's nuts, right? Even if it ultimately led to Trey Lance, like that's pretty crazy to make a trade of that magnitude. And I think
simply
it's pretty
for the
fair
right to make the pick.
I think it's pretty fair based on what they said, based on talking about the players, based on John Lynch. I don't think that's true. I will acknowledge the possibility of that maybe being true. I don't believe it's true.
So if I say to you, I think they traded up with an order, with a list, maybe feeling like there were a couple guys they would consider in that list, that's acceptable? Even though, but it wasn't, we absolutely know who we're going to take?
If you told me that when they made the trade, they felt comfortable on tape, like they think Trey Lance, they would take him number 3 overall, but we got to get to know the guy, like I would understand that. Or just knowing like no chance, because it's just an economic exercise, like a player with those attributes. To me, you make that trade knowing once you kind of watch him, once people get their hands on him and you have the background information, like this guy is never going to sniff 12. If they had, this is where my pushback on Mac Jones, if they had made that trade for Mac Jones, you understand the market, and that would have been an embarrassing thing. But they didn't. So I have to give them credit. Like Trey Lance, and back to what I said about Denver, and this is where I think Florio's just kind of been proven wrong. Like Trey Lance was the guy all these teams were kind of circling. And for whatever reason, and I don't quite understand it, even though my guy ended up getting him, I think Justin Fields, even if in NFL circles most people had Trey over Justin, I think Justin was a pretty damn good prospect. But clearly, I mean, teams were off the scent on that one a little. Off the scent's the wrong word, just off on him. Right? Because those 2 teams passed him. I think, would you agree that Denver and Carolina would have been interested in Trey Lance and try to take him?
Well, yeah, I mean, I think that now with hindsight, yes. But I don't think there's –
yeah.
I don't think at all he would have been there at 12. I don't think there's a chance he would have been there.
I don't think he would have made it. I think people would have traded up to like
part of it would have been if you were the Niners, you probably, even if you're sitting there at 12 that day and then he's sitting there at 6, you would have tried to go up to get him in all likelihood, right? I mean, how far did Chicago come to get Fields?
20-11.
So you're telling me somebody else?
If they didn't take him,
my point is we're only talking about
Minnesota was going to trade for him too.
That's right,
Fields.
Thanks to the Panthers social team for that breaking news. But we're only talking about teams that were that were in the top 12, right? When you're talking about Denver and Carolina. There's other teams that would have been beyond the top 12 that also would have considered moving up.
Yeah.
Hell, Bill.
Because some of the teams in the top 10 have quarterbacks, right?
Bill might have considered
shitty.
I don't know.
Yeah, who knows?
You know what I mean? Like if Trey Lance is sitting there at 11, are the Niners just going to get to sit there and seems unlikely.
It's hard. Like I get like they have tenuous quarterback situations because their quarterbacks are, a little sensitive. But like I have a hard time calling Green Bay and Seattle dysfunctional. Like they just have these unique players that are just kind of being a pain in the ass. Like they've had it pretty good. It's hard for to consistently win like those two franchises do and just be like these idiots. And also like Stafford for Goff, like that's just in my world not dysfunctional. Is it a miscalculation? Did they pay him when they shouldn't have? And all this 100%. Did they change their mind? Things change. Because ultimately McVay, if it had happened to Kyle, it would have been a very polarizing thing. But they kept winning, so we don't talk about it. McVay had to give the thumbs up on the huge contract extension for Jared Goff. He had to have. Or been behind it and cool with it. And then he clearly changed course within, it felt like 12 months. It might have been a little longer, that 18 months. Like multiple seasons, they were out on him. They go to the Super Bowl with him, they extend him, and then 2 years later, he can't stand him. If you and I, the way we talk about the Niners, like we would have talked about that nonstop if it would have been the quarterback and Kyle equivalent, right? He okays a huge deal and then he hates him 2 years later. Like that's pretty nuts. But what the one curveball McVay has that Kyle just won't have is like, I didn't draft the guy. We were winning with him and then things changed. Like he wasn't my handpicked guy.
Yeah, it's also just the nature of you kind of get stuck with quarterbacks and you end up in spots you don't want to be when their contracts are up.
They did pay him early though. Remember, like after year 3.
I understand, but to back to your point on dysfunction, I give the Packers, I give the Seahawks a ton of credit for being this good for this long. You are this good for, in the Packers case, with Rodgers. 14 years, right? Whatever it is. You're this good. They've been a Super Bowl contender, Seattle, for a decade. Like, if you're going to be good for a decade, it's going to be hard. And I go back to Antonio Brown and the Steelers. What did we say about the Steelers when they got rid of Antonio Brown? The Steelers are dysfunctional, or it's amazing the Steelers made it this long with Antonio Brown? That's what we said. That's right. Like, so I give the Packers credit in many ways. Now, not with this particular situation. We'll see how this resolves itself. But if it resolves itself, they're going to get credit for that. Seattle seems like for the moment it's resolved itself. They get credit for that. It's hard to be on top of the mountain with egos and money and all the attention, all of that comes with it. It is not easy for anybody to stay up at top. So you stay at the top in the NFL, whoever you're a Super Bowl contender for a decade, you're not dysfunctional.
You know why, Guy?
Why?
Wind blows the strongest at the top of the mountain.
That's a good line.
Feels like a low Neil line. It's one of those you just remember.